The Great World Cup Sell-Off, Infantino's failed Wall Street gamble. Flint West reporting. This wasn't simply another corruption scandal. It wasn't just another FIFA controversy. And it certainly wasn't about a bad investment decision. It was something much deeper. It was a fundamental misunderstanding of where value actually comes from. Because this wasn't a fight over football. It was a fight over ownership, not legal ownership, economic ownership. And those are very different things. Section 1. Gianni Infantino attempted something that, on paper, looked like sophisticated financial engineering. The proposal was simple. Take FIFA's commercial rights, place them inside a newly created corporate vehicle called FIFA Forward Enterprise, and sell roughly 20% of that company to a private equity consortium led by Joshua Kushner's Thrive Capital. The price? Around $4.2 billion. Now, at first glance, that sounds like an enormous amount of money, until you do the maths. The 2026 World Cup generated approximately $15 billion in gross revenue in a single tournament cycle. Yet this proposal would have surrendered roughly 1/5 of every future commercial, broadcasting, sponsorship, and licensing stream. Forever. Not for one tournament, not for 10 years, perpetually. It was the financial equivalent of selling the family farm for a check that barely covers next year's harvest. Section 2. But the numbers weren't the real mistake. The governance was. Infantino fundamentally misunderstood the institution he was leading. FIFA is not a corporation. It is a Swiss nonprofit. Its mandate isn't to maximize shareholder returns. Its mandate is to steward the world's most valuable sporting competition on behalf of global football. That distinction matters because a steward is not an owner. Section 3. The proposed structure would have inserted a permanent private equity claimant between FIFA's revenues and football itself. Think about how the World Cup actually works. Host governments build the stadiums. Taxpayers fund the infrastructure. Cities absorb the logistical risk. National associations provide the players. Fans create the audience. Broadcasters create the media value. Sponsors create the commercial demand. FIFA contributes the governance. It contributes the tournament. But remarkably little of the capital expenditure, which means the World Cup is already an extraordinarily high-margin enterprise. The 2026 cycle generated roughly $15 billion. And as a Swiss nonprofit, around 90% of that money is ultimately redistributed back into football through prize money, development programs, and member associations. Private equity solves one problem: capital shortages. FIFA didn't have a capital shortage. It had an abundance of intangible capital: history, trust, tradition, global participation, and a product watched by billions of people. There was nothing to fix, only something to monetize. This content is brought to you by Bobby Giggs. Promote your brand here and reach a wide audience across platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Follow the links in the description to get started. Section 4. And that's where the crisis began. To push the proposal through, member associations were reportedly promised unprecedented upfront payments, between $20 and $40 million each, more than double the traditional allocation. At the same time, they were given a rigid deadline to approve what amounted to one of the largest governance changes in FIFA's history. Meanwhile, senior executives inside FIFA itself, including Chief Operating Officer Kevin Lamore and Arsene Wenger, were reportedly left completely outside the process. Many only learned about the proposal through media leaks. That isn't governance. That's political engineering. Section 5. But here's where the story becomes fascinating. Infantino believed he controlled FIFA. And legally, he did. What he failed to appreciate was that he didn't control the product, because football has two completely different power structures. The first is electoral, 211 member associations, one nation, one vote. That's how presidents get elected. But then there's the second structure, the one that actually matters economically: UEFA, CONMEBOL, the federations that supply the overwhelming majority of elite players, commercial audiences, global television demand, and footballing prestige. They don't simply hold votes, they supply the product. And that's an entirely different form of leverage. Section 6. The moment Europe's major federations, along with South America, recognized what was happening, the game changed completely. They didn't need to win a vote. They simply threatened to leave. Think about that. A World Cup without Brazil, without Argentina, without Germany, without France, without England, without Spain, without Italy. Legally, FIFA still exists. Economically, the asset disappears. That's the difference between governing an institution and controlling the product. Infantino confused the two. Section 7. This is why the proposal collapsed almost overnight. The political coalition evaporated. Legal action followed. Evidence preservation demands were issued. Senior advisors resigned. National federations withdrew political support. And what looked like an unstoppable governance maneuver became one of the greatest self-inflicted crises in modern sports administration. Section 8. But I think there's an even bigger lesson here, one that extends far beyond football. Control doesn't ultimately belong to the institution. It belongs to whoever creates the irreplaceable value. Governments don't own productive economies. Universities don't own knowledge. Social media companies don't own creators. Banks don't own depositors. Open source foundations don't own developers. And FIFA doesn't own football. It administers football. Those are not the same thing. Section 9. I think this episode reveals a much deeper invariant. Stewards become dangerous the moment they begin confusing custodianship with ownership. Because once an institution starts treating a public trust as a private balance sheet, the people who actually create the value eventually remind everyone who really owns the product. And that, more than anything, is why the Great World Cup sell-off was always destined to fail. Flint West, signing off.